Marcus Wellington was taken hostage at First National Bank when his only hope was the police negotiator. The voice on the other end of the phone was Detective Sarah Chen, the fiancée he had fled from 9 years ago on their wedding day, saying this is the wrong decision, and now his life depended on Sarah's persuasion skills. Marcus Wellington stepped into the marble lobby of First National Bank on Fifth Avenue, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floor as he approached the VIP banking section. The 40-year-old millionaire real estate developer had scheduled this Friday afternoon meeting to finalize the wire transfer for his latest acquisition, a luxury hotel chain that would expand his empire across 3 additional states. The bank's opulent interior reflected the wealth of its clientele, with crystal chandeliers casting elegant light across mahogany furnishings and oil paintings that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Marcus felt comfortable in this environment of luxury and exclusivity, where his net worth commanded immediate respect and preferential treatment. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant Jennifer about weekend plans and Monday's board meeting, but Marcus silenced the device as he entered the private banking area. This wire transfer required his complete attention, as any error could complicate the hotel acquisition and delay his expansion timeline by months. The private banking specialist, Mrs. Rodriguez, greeted Marcus with the professional warmth reserved for the bank's most valuable customers. She had prepared all necessary documentation for the $50 million transfer, including security protocols and international banking confirmations required for such a substantial transaction. Marcus reviewed each document methodically, his business instincts demanding verification of every detail before authorizing the transfer. 9 years of building Wellington properties had taught him that success required absolute precision in financial transactions, especially those involving international partnerships and complex ownership structures. At exactly 2:47 p.m., as Marcus was signing the final authorization forms, 3 masked gunmen burst through the bank's main entrance. Their movements were coordinated and professional, suggesting military training and careful planning rather than desperate amateurs attempting a spontaneous robbery. The lead gunman fired 2 shots into the ceiling, sending plaster raining down on terrified customers and bank employees who immediately dropped to the floor. "Nobody move, nobody gets hurt," he shouted through a voice modulator that disguised his identity. "This is a robbery, but we're not here for your wallets." Marcus found himself trapped in the private banking area with Mrs. Rodriguez and 2 other wealthy clients who had been conducting similar high-value transactions. The gunmen seemed to know exactly where to find the bank's most valuable customers, suggesting inside knowledge of daily operations and VIP scheduling. The terrorists, as they soon revealed themselves to be, were not interested in the bank's cash reserves or safety deposit boxes. Their demands involved the release of political prisoners and international recognition of their cause, using the hostages as leverage to force government negotiations. Marcus realized this was not a simple robbery, but a carefully orchestrated political action designed to generate maximum media attention and international pressure. The hostages had been selected specifically because their wealth and prominence would guarantee worldwide news coverage and government response. Police units arrived within minutes, establishing a perimeter around the bank and beginning evacuation of surrounding buildings. Marcus could see through the windows as SWAT teams positioned themselves strategically, while news crews gathered behind police barriers to broadcast the developing crisis. The lead terrorist, who identified himself only as the commander, established contact with police negotiators using the bank's phone system. His demands were clear: release of 12 political prisoners held in federal custody, safe passage to a non-extradition country, and live television coverage of his political manifesto. As hours passed, Marcus found himself pressed against the marble floor of the private banking area, struggling to process the reality that his life was now in the hands of armed extremists and police negotiators he had never met. All his wealth and influence were useless in this situation. The initial police negotiator had been a young officer whose inexperience showed in his handling of the terrorists' psychological manipulation tactics. After 2 hours of fruitless communication, the department called in their most experienced hostage negotiator to take over the complex case. "This is Detective Sarah Chen, with the NYPD Crisis Negotiation Team," came the new voice through the bank's speaker system. I'm here to help resolve this situation peacefully. Can you tell me what you need to make everyone safe? Marcus felt his blood run cold as he recognized the voice that had once whispered, I love you and I can't wait to be your wife. Sarah Chen, whose heart he had broken 9 years ago when his fear of commitment overwhelmed his love for her on their wedding day. The memory came flooding back with devastating clarity. Their wedding had been planned for Saturday afternoon at the Plaza Hotel, with 300 guests waiting to celebrate their union. Sarah had been radiant in her wedding dress, confident that they were beginning their life together as partners in love and ambition. But Marcus had spent the previous night consumed by panic about losing his independence and focus. Marriage represented compromise and emotional availability that seemed incompatible with the ruthless dedication required to build his real estate empire. Sarah deserved a husband who could prioritize their relationship over business opportunities. On their wedding morning, Marcus had convinced himself that marrying Sarah would be unfair to both of them. She needed someone who could give her the emotional commitment and family life she deserved, while he needed the freedom to pursue opportunities that required single-minded focus and occasional moral flexibility. Marcus had left the Plaza Hotel that morning without explanation, taking a taxi to the airport and flying to London for a business opportunity that could have been postponed. Sarah had found only a brief note explaining that he couldn't go through with the marriage because it would be the wrong decision for both of them. The decision had devastated Sarah and humiliated her in front of everyone they knew, but Marcus had convinced himself it was also honest and mature. Better to hurt her before the ceremony than to fail her as a husband by prioritizing business over their relationship. Now, 9 years later, Marcus found himself entirely dependent on Sarah's professional skills and psychological expertise to save his life and the lives of other hostages. The irony was overwhelming that the woman whose trust he had shattered was now his only hope for survival. Sarah's voice continued through the speakers as she began establishing rapport with the terrorist leader, her tone calm and professional despite whatever emotions Marcus's presence might have triggered. Her competence was evident in how she managed the complex psychological dynamics of hostage negotiation. I understand you have important things you want the world to hear, Sarah was saying to the commander. Can you help me understand what's most important to you right now? What would make you feel like your message is being heard? Marcus could hear the advanced training and experience in Sarah's voice as she employed classic negotiation techniques to build trust and gather intelligence. She had clearly become exactly the kind of law enforcement professional she had dreamed of being during their relationship. Through the terrorist responses, Marcus learned that Sarah had spent 9 years building a distinguished career in crisis negotiation, becoming one of the NYPD's most skilled hostage negotiators. Her success rate in peaceful resolution of dangerous situations was apparently exceptional. The negotiation continued for hours as Sarah worked to establish psychological connection with the commander while coordinating with tactical teams positioned around the building. Her strategic thinking was evident in how she managed multiple aspects of the crisis simultaneously. Marcus found himself listening intently to Sarah's voice, remembering the intelligence and emotional depth that had first attracted him to her. She had challenged him intellectually and supported him emotionally, pushing him to consider priorities beyond financial accumulation and professional advancement. As evening approached, Sarah had made significant progress in understanding the terrorist's motivations and psychological state. She had convinced him to release 2 elderly hostages who required medical attention, demonstrating her ability to save lives through communication rather than force. I can tell you care deeply about justice and making sure people understand your perspective, Sarah was saying. What if we could arrange for your statement to be broadcast during primetime news coverage? Would that help accomplish what you're trying to achieve? The commander seemed responsive to Sarah's suggestions, indicating that her psychological approach was more effective than the aggressive tactics that had failed earlier. Marcus realized that his survival depended entirely on Sarah's ability to convince an armed extremist to surrender peacefully. During a brief pause in negotiations, Sarah's voice came through privately on a phone line directed to the hostages. This is Detective Chen speaking directly to the people inside. I want you to know that we're working to bring everyone home safely. Stay calm and follow the instructions you're given. Marcus recognized that Sarah was speaking to him along with the other hostages, but she showed no sign of personal recognition in her professional communication. Her focus was entirely on the crisis management rather than their shared history. The breakthrough came near midnight when Sarah convinced the commander that his political message would have greater impact if delivered by a man who chose peace over violence. Her psychological insights had identified his core motivation as seeking respect and recognition rather than causing harm. You have the chance to be remembered as someone who stood for justice without hurting innocent people, Sarah told him. That's the kind of leader people remember and respect. That's how real change happens. The surrender was coordinated carefully, with the commander releasing all hostages before emerging with his hands raised to be taken into custody. Sarah had saved 9 lives, including Marcus's, through her skill in psychological manipulation and crisis de-escalation. Marcus was processed through standard hostage debriefing procedures, while Sarah coordinated with other departments to ensure all aspects of the incident were properly documented. She maintained complete professional distance, treating him like any other victim requiring police services. Outside the bank, Marcus watched Sarah conducting media interviews about the successful resolution of the crisis. Her competence and authority were evident in how she handled reporters' questions while protecting sensitive operational details that could compromise future negotiations. The contrast between Sarah's meaningful career and Marcus's wealth accumulation was stark and undeniable. She had dedicated her life to protecting others and resolving conflicts peacefully, while he had focused entirely on generating profits and acquiring properties for personal enrichment. In the days following the hostage crisis, Marcus learned through news coverage about Sarah's extensive experience and recognition in crisis negotiation. She had apparently specialized in hostage situations throughout her career, successfully resolving dozens of dangerous standoffs without loss of life. Sarah's success had been achieved while building the stable family life that Marcus had been too afraid to provide. News articles mentioned her husband, also a police officer, and their 2 young children who had grown up proud of their mother's heroic work. Marcus realized that Sarah had not only survived his abandonment, but had flourished in ways he had never imagined possible when he convinced himself that marriage would limit her potential. She had built exactly the kind of purposeful career that brought meaning and satisfaction to her daily work. The hostage crisis had reminded Marcus of his own mortality while showing him examples of people whose work served others rather than just accumulating personal wealth. Sarah's dedication to saving lives seemed infinitely more significant than his ability to acquire luxury properties and generate investment returns. 9 months after the bank crisis, Marcus established a foundation focused on supporting crisis negotiation training and victim assistance programs. The foundation was administered anonymously, providing resources that would help negotiators like Sarah save more lives in future emergencies. Marcus never attempted to contact Sarah personally or to acknowledge their shared history beyond the professional interaction during the hostage situation. He understood that she had moved beyond their past relationship to build something important and meaningful with someone who could appreciate her fully. But the memory of Sarah's competence and dedication during the bank crisis served as a constant reminder of the kind of person he had lost through his own fear and limitations. She had become exactly what she had dreamed of becoming during their time together, while he had achieved financial success at the cost of personal relationships and meaningful contribution to others' welfare. The crisis negotiator who had saved Marcus's life in the bank hostage situation had also saved him from a life measured only by profit margins, showing him through her example of dedicated service that success could be defined by lives saved rather than wealth accumulated, and that the most important achievements were those that served others rather than just advancing personal interests. Marcus would always be grateful to Detective Sarah Chen for more than just the psychological expertise that had negotiated his release from the bank terrorists. She had inadvertently shown him possibilities for meaning and purpose that his wealth alone could never provide, and had inspired him to use his resources in ways that honored the values she had tried to teach him 9 years too late.